And we're back. Welcome to episode 23, season 2 of the Northern Lights podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Eigenman, joined by special co-host today, Clement Dabney III. Doc Dabs, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a beautiful Friday. We haven't had weather like this in a year.
Yeah, it feels like it, man. Today, as we're recording this, is March 14th. Happy Pie Day to you.
Happy Pie Day.
I bought a slice of pecan pie for later after the show. I'm excited to jump into it, you know what I mean? And but, you know, more importantly than Pie Day, it's the last day of applications for this round in the Minnesota cannabis industry. How would you describe your position as a applicant for the Minnesota cannabis industry, and like what's the last few weeks been like for you?
The last few weeks have been kind of hectic. It's just like, I don't know, as an applicant, so I was a social equity applicant. I failed so I got my social equity verification. Then I applied. They sent me back some things they didn't like. I reapplied, then they failed my application. So now, between then and now, I just fixed all of the things that they wanted updated. Sure.
So you cured it in that in-between time, which, you know, is good that they allowed the second round or this redo. That's unfortunately why Tanner isn't able to join us today. He's helping a group get their micro license put together, but you know, shout out to Tanner Barris. We love Tanner Barris, so shout out to you. Yeah, we do. We miss you. Yeah, see you next Friday. But yeah, so like we're wrapping this up. What are folks saying? You know, you've been talking to a lot of people. How is this round going? I'm hearing like over 700 micro business applications right now.
That sounds about right. Yeah. So I guess for me, I think it's just like so I had to get mine in on the 4th. For me, it was just like a weight had been lifted. It was like anxiety because, you know, we've been, at least I wanted to take my business from this hemp-derived edibles business to an adult-use cannabis business, while maintaining the hemp-derived edibles side.
Sure.
So it's just like, this is the next hurdle to take to achieve some growth. So it's just like, it's really stressful and anxiety-provoking, like,
yeah,
did I mess this up again?
It's such
you're
a
like
tough
rethinking it. You're like double, triple, quadruple checking, making sure everything is in order. And now once I got it submitted, like all that weight had been lifted. And yeah, I've had several groups of people calling and texting me late at night. How do I fill this out? What are they actually looking for?
Right.
So it's just like Tanner, like just trying to help the friends get their applications in.
Yeah, move to that next phase in this adult use recreational cannabis world that we're living in, or that we hope to aspire to be a part of.
Exactly.
Right. Well, today we're going to continue with the news. We've got Doc Dabs here to give his point of view. And later on in the show, we've got a special interview with Zoe Hansen from Eco Garden Supply that Tanner recorded right before we jumped in the studio. So stick around for the Eco Garden Supply, and we'll be right back.
Ever felt like running a cannabis business means running in circles just to get basic banking? Union Bank and Trust gets it. They've been helping cannabis businesses for over 10 years, solving problems like securing accounts, managing cash flow, and navigating regulations. No more jumping through hoops, no more runarounds. Just straightforward banking solutions built on trust, integrity, and performance. Check out unionbankandtrust.com today. That's unionbankandtrust.com.
All right, the first story that we're going to get in today is about tribal compact languages and how they affect market dynamics here in Minnesota.
Right.
So I've been working on a story at the Star Tribune relating to this topic. It's largely kind of based on a lot of social equity applicants as well as, black entrepreneurs kind of view hold on, let me start and give some background to the topic.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, Minnesota and its Native American communities have not had the best relationship historically.
Right.
So like I think that, you know, social equity applicants, black applicants, they recognize, you know, that we are the site of the largest mass execution in the country.
Of like the Ojibwe people and the Dakota people.
Yep, exactly. We put 1,600 Dakota men, women, and children in the concentration camps at Fort Snelling. We had this bounty and scalping policies for a very long time where the Washington Redskins they renamed their team because the redskin essentially means when you scalped a Native American, you had to have enough of their red skin to get your bounty. So Minnesota had this bounty program where you could kill Dakota and Ojibwe men, women, and children, and you had to cut their scalp off to get your reward.
Wow.
And they did that for quite a while here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
They also were subjected to these boarding schools where they got stripped of their language and culture, and that went into the 1970s. So it's like, and then we have the Dawes Act, which basically took native land, broke it up, and then sold it off to white settlers. So we in Minnesota have this poor relationship historically.
Clearly, they've been disadvantaged.
Yeah, with our Native American community. So I think that we need this background before we kind of dive deep into this topic. And I think that most of these social equity applicants and black applicants recognize the historical traumas that were done to our Native American brothers and sisters here in Minnesota. And I guess just to give my personal background, so I'm Choctaw, which is not a Native American group from Minnesota. They were Mississippi mainly. They got most of them. Some of them are still there, but most of them got trailer-tiered to Oklahoma. And I'm black, or slave descendant black from Mississippi, and German, Irish, French.
Sure.
From Minnesota, South Dakota.
Sure.
So I think I kind of have a unique vantage point in that, like, I kind of see all the stakeholders' perspectives.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is it's not so much that hemp entrepreneurs or even black entrepreneurs have issues with the business that's being done on reservation land. I believe where the issue comes into play is, given the negotiations that they're having with the governor's office, it's the ability to open up dispensaries off reservation and still have those products and those transactions be tax-free. And so they're not subject to, in theory at this point, those dispensaries would not be subject to any Minnesota taxation, but yet they are off reservation land is where this market may be going.
Yep. I think that, I would agree with that. And I think there's also other advantages that I think that tribal businesses off the reservation are going to get. There's this early entry.
Sure.
So that brings, that it allows you to establish your infrastructure faster. You're getting this potential retail dominance because you could be able to build customer loyalty and build brand recognition.
Of course, it's happening right now. And so for Eric Taubel, for interim director Eric Taubel to say in the Star Tribune article that I read this morning that no one is getting a head start, that's not possible with a race. If there is a race and people are able to open their stores and doors at different times, inevitably somebody is starting before another person, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I think that comment is incredibly disingenuous and almost very borderline misinformation.
I know. I think he cleaned it up later in the article, but for that initial point to be nobody is getting a head start is a head scratcher.
And I think to kind of even follow up on this on like the potential legal aspects here is that, let's just say they get these tribal compacts signed and out the door through the governor's office, which is a separate system. Then OCM licensing state businesses. Let's just say that the contract gets signed before licenses are handed out, and OCM gets sued again. We could have these tribal dispensaries opening up in the cities,
right?
And a further delay on state OCM license.
It's possible, businesses. Yeah. And one of the questions I was going to ask you around the application deadline and just the window for cannabis business licenses. When do you think they will hold the lottery?
Oh my God.
Because so far it's been May, June, which is not a real month.
Yep, which is not a real month. And is it, because it took them a couple months last time to get anything done, and now they have an influx of a greater number of applications.
I'm going to assume it's going to be after the legislative session.
I would agree with that, yeah. Which
it tends to fall towards the second half of May, right? And so, I mean, we'll be recording through May 30th. I wonder if we'll see a lottery before or after.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then, even when people get the lottery, plants take time to grow.
They do.
So it's just like there's still a lag. I think that Minnesotans are going to get really excited. Oh, the licenses went out. But I think that just due to plant growth cycle, we're still months away. Even when the light release happens, we're still months away from being able to go to a shop and buy products.
Let's talk about plants growing and some of the issues that you brought up in the Star Tribune article that came out late Sunday night on the, was that last Sunday? And 2 Sundays from when you're hearing this, and then it debuted in the paper Monday, so 8 days from when people are hearing this. Some of the things you brought up and some of the things our fellow peers brought up was like being able to tell if the product was grown in Minnesota or not. I didn't know that was a possibility, that you could actually study a plant. What's that called?
Isotope testing. So basically the plant pulls in all of its carbon from the atmosphere. They're basically breathing in carbon, letting out oxygen. So you can radio, you can get a geographic location of where that carbon's from.
Wow.
As well as you can look at like the water source essentially. So you have this hydrogen and carbon radioisotope dating, so that you can actually put a fingerprint on where something was grown and where these products originate from. And it's not even that expensive of testing. There is no state that requires it yet, but a lot of these states, their versions of the OCM have actually used it when they get complaints.
Sure.
So it's like a tool. I honestly, personally, I think that it should be a required test.
Yeah.
Not required on like every single product, but if they get a complaint that somebody's abusing the metric system, which is actually really easy to abuse.
And it's not the metric system like deciliters and liters. We're talking about METRC, the software.
The software that's used for track and trace, which is likely what we're hearing the Minnesota OCM is going to choose to go with.
Right.
So basically, it's like a metric is a way to track and trace. You have a barcode for every plant that grows, but it's really easy to bring plant material in or move plant material out to the black market using the system.
That's what I hear. You can game the software.
You can very easily, and it's been done in every state. It's been used in. Just type in metric abuses Colorado, metric abuses California.
Sure, metric abuses Colorado, California. Great, but on the genetic side of things, as somebody who sells seeds and grows for seed generation. Talk about what you're concerned about when it comes to like bringing seeds into the state, and then there's going to be a deadline when you can't bring seeds any longer into the state. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yep. So the OCM has enacted a rule that's basically saying that you can only bring in genetics into a certain point. So let's just say you're a really large company or one of these you're an MSO or you're one of the medical companies, and you've already acquired a significant amount of germplasm. Germplasm is like your genetic resources, your cultivars you have on hand.
Okay.
Blue Dreams, Monkey Skunk, Mac, OG, Sour Diesel. You have all these different cultivars in your stable and in metric by the deadline.
Yes.
Then there are approved products that you can grow. But anything after the deadline needs to get further approval from OCM, and we don't know when that process will take place, how quickly how quick they will actually address those issues.
Right.
So it's like a breeder for me. So I own this A&D seed company as well, Empire Genetics.
Yeah.
We breed seed for the Minnesota marketplace. It would really pigeonhole my business into I can only utilize what I have on hand before that date enacts.
Kneecapping innovation.
It kneecaps innovation because, if you think about plant breeding and having wild progenitor plants, in more wild species, you have a lot more genomic diversity. There's a lot more genes in the gene pool.
Sure.
But when you start domesticating plants, you start decreasing that gene pool. So like corn, soybeans, most of the large agronomic crops, even if for elite varieties on the marketplace, they're like 90+% identical within the genome. So they've like pigeonholed the genome because they're selecting for traits of interest, not shattering, so the seed falling off the kernel or the pod. So there's a lot of traits that they've selected in on.
Yeah.
But then a lot of these other genes that could be useful for innovation.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to put them in because you don't have access to them when this deadline occurs.
Right. So if you kind of look at the more developed corn and soy market and the homogeny that exists with this crop, we're sort of on that same path to homogeny and less diversity through what the OCM is outlining. And another issue that I'm hearing in the marketplace, or that I'm hearing behind the scenes, is like the OCM was given so much power through the legalization bill that they really have a limited amount of reason to listen outside of what they're doing. And so folks are finding it troubling to not get anywhere with the OCM when they have, in their eyes, legitimate feedback or ideas, or they have questions around fairness and questions around how this market will inevitably look. And if they're going to apply for a license and they're going to put a lot of money into this new industry, they want to have some certainty that it's going to work out for them.
Exactly. So I think that, that's scary as a business owner, because like a lot of these cannabis, like a cannabis grow up, we're hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in investment capital.
Yeah.
And in an already risky environment. Yeah. I think that's, anxiety provoking. That's, and there aren't these people to reach out to. Like, I think that's what I've heard when I've talked to a lot of these business owners, is they'll be reaching out to OCM, and OCM's not getting back to them with their concerns, even on the license application side. Mm-hmm. Like, I know somebody that forgot their password, and they're trying to get a password, and they didn't hear back for over 9 days, and now, that window's today. They're SOL.
9 days.
And I think that even on the rulemaking side, they've been given so much power to develop these rules. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to segue into the 70% cap, but even they gave they opened it up for public comment. They had a first draft of these rules. Then from my looking at these rules, comparing and contrasting, they didn't make that much difference, in my personal opinion. Yeah. On matters that were really important to small business owners. Yeah. And they've opened the public comment again. I think that one of the key issues that people brought up is this 70% concentrate limit
for THC.
And the OCM really having where is the scientific studies saying anything above 70% is harmful or detrimental to people?
Sure. I mean, we've interviewed Bryant Jones on the show, and Bryant opened our eyes to the method of how you smoke or consume the cannabis really dictates the actual amount of THC that you're getting. So, the flower could be 30% THC, which I know you have some thoughts around how folks test at such a high THC percentage, which we can unpack as well. And you talk about it in the Star Tribune article. But, whether you're smoking a joint or a blunt or a bong or a dryer vaporizer, that's all going to affect how much THC you're actually able to consume from that percentage of THC that's in the plant upon purchase. And then depending on how dry the flower is or how wet or moist the flower is, that will influence the THC percentage that they tested at, which then gets put on the label of the product. And so there's a lot of manipulation that can be done, and capping rosin or concentrates at 70% when there's not clear scientific studies to say this is more dangerous. Just give us more of a wide open playing field and let the market sort itself out. I mean, I compare things to alcohol quite a bit on this show because we have a craft beer industry and a craft spirits industry, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to have a craft concentrates industry and craft cannabis at large. But there's a lot of concern with small businesses fighting against two medical providers, that's all. And then, a significant amount of head start and availability for the tribes to operate on and off reservation. I want there to be a diverse market, but they shouldn't be stopping products from coming online that are within reason to produce.
I agree 100%. And I think that just to kind of piggyback off this idea is like, think about your rural folks, these rural farmers. They might have some more older, outdated greenhouses, or they've got hoop houses. A great avenue for producing and growing cannabis for them,
Sure.
and the outlook for product wise, those aren't going to be your high craft flowers. That's not the top shelf flower.
Sure.
You're going to use that flower you produce to
Yep.
make these concentrates, to make these carts, to make these value added products.
Yeah.
And
More refined. I like to use the word refined, and like you make more money selling paper than you do selling timber, right? Because the tree gets more refined.
Exactly.
You know, you can make more money selling a Dixon Ticonderoga pencil that, you know, has been turned from a log into a useful tool. And the further that you're able to refine a product, the more of a premium you're able to gather on the market.
Yep.
And let's give these folks like Green Machine and Firebeards and these individual or small local businesses, let's give them a chance to stand out because they are going to put so much time and energy into their craft.
And let's just say for the sake of argument that the OCM's like, well, your brain doesn't finish developing until you're 25. And they're afraid that, you know, these high dose THC products are unsafe for people under the age of 25.
Sure.
Why not? They have the power to say 70% plus products can only be bought by people 25 and older.
Sure.
Because they essentially made this 20, you know, there is that 20, I think it's in statute or whatever, 21 plus.
Yeah.
What stops them from creating that? If you were going to have the 70% rule,
right?
Why couldn't you just have a, you know, semicolon for purchase for people above 25?
Yeah. You know, if that's how they feel necessary, but look, like you and I, we met shortly after high school. Like, you get access to a lot of alcohol in high school, even at a young age, because it's made illegal and because it's, you know, put in mom and dad's liquor cabinet, and that creates that, I want to try it because it's dangerous and it's kept away from me. And like, I think there's been more knowledge and more education that's come out around cannabis since you and I were in high school, and you know, we're seeing studies that show the next generation is consuming less of these drugs. And I'm going to say drugs in general because alcohol should be referenced as a drug in the same way that cannabis is referenced as a drug. And if you consume cannabis consciously and responsibly, you may find that you use alcohol less. I know that's true for me as I've grown up a little more. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, the media that you're doing outside of, you know, hopping on the show here. You were featured on KFan recently, or you were mentioned, I should say, the Dan Barrero show, Drive Time, you know, 5 to 9, I think it is, or everybody knows KFan, Dan Barrero, and so they brought you up on the show.
They did, yeah. Shout out Dan Barrero and KFan. We appreciate, you know, you guys talking about our Star Tribune article. Yeah, so it's really cool. I think that you know, cannabis in Minnesota culture are incredibly entwined. Just from my work at the University of Minnesota, you know, there's a Bell Museum. So we have a Museum of Natural History. It has an herbarium. THC, we did some studies on those samples in the herbarium, and THC dates back to 1878. Presence of THC production dates back to 1878 in Minnesota. So we have a long history with cannabis here in Minnesota.
And that's about as long as Minnesota's been a state.
Yeah, I think, So it's just like, I think 2 years after its founding. So,
you know, and I hate to harp on this.
20 years, but
I hate to harp on this. Yeah, what was it, 58? That came?
I think 50, yeah. So about 20 years.
But one of the critiques with the OCM is that up until recently, they, and not at the director level for the overall program, they haven't had somebody with cannabis experience leading the program, leading the office. A lot of people boil it down to a lack of understanding of the actual industry or the plant. And it's frustrating knowing that they had different options they could have chose.
Yep. Yeah. So I think that we've seen, you know, we're on our third high commander right now.
Yeah.
Our third director. And they seem to choose, after the first one, they seem to choose favored bureaucrats. You know,
bureaucrats, right.
Charlene Briner, Eric Tauble, rather than somebody that knows the industry. And I think that's incredibly dangerous for this industry, because I think that it allows for lobbying to kind of influence the thoughts of these decision makers. Right. Because if you have somebody that doesn't actually know what they're talking about and doing, and you've got interests telling them it should be done this way, then they're like, oh, well, this is what we're hearing from people. And I think that one of the problems in Minnesota cannabis, at least for the small business side, is like we don't really have like an organization of small cannabis businesses that's lobbying on our behalf and organizing on our behalf.
Right.
And I think that's, a big hole because like I think most laws in my experience are shaped due to lobbying. Like you lobbied a congressperson, a senator, or you're lobbying, in this case, the OCM director or people around him.
Yeah.
Or the governor.
Yeah.
And that's how laws are getting crafted. And I think that small cannabis and, these social equity applicants, we just don't have that arm of influence.
Sure. Well, and with the two medical providers, one, it's a duopoly. And two, they happen to kind of be run from outside of the state of Minnesota.
They're MSOs, yeah.
Yeah, they're MSOs, and like, Vireo might have gotten its start here, but they've moved into the other markets. Like, I don't know if they identify as a New York company they're multi-state operators, so they have operations technically in multiple states. But the Minnesota cannabis industry should first and foremost serve Minnesota businesses and Minnesota tribal tribes. Like 10 out of the 11 tribes are looking at the Minnesota cannabis industry as an opportunity, and you have thousands of hemp-derived businesses that have entered into this space. And if we are going to allow two medical providers to have uncapped opportunity to grow as much as they need, it's going to significantly lower the price per pound of flower, which is going to send waves and ripples through the entire industry and affect not only the tribes that are selling and growing flower as we speak, but the folks that haven't even gotten into the market yet.
100%. And to jump on the back of this idea is like, these large operators can reduce and price compress, but that's money leaving our state. Like if we're looking at social equity applicants, small Minnesota businesses, and the tribes, like I worked at Red Lake. I built out their first building, which then now became Native Care.
Yeah.
So their grow I helped design and build. It was basically a money machine when they opened Native Care.
Sure.
They were bringing multiple $1 million in every month. So it's almost a new casino for them.
Wow.
That money is staying here.
It helps. It's run as a nonprofit. It helps the folks. It helps the Red Lake Nation.
Yeah. So the money that's generated from cannabis up at the tribe currently, that's money creating jobs. Yes. That's money that's influencing those communities. That's people getting to do something that they more care about than working at a casino or working at some small gas station there. Like
creating a better Minnesota.
It's creating a better Minnesota. Yeah. So it's almost like the idea of a brain drain. But it's an economic drain. Like giving all this power to these large companies, and they're not based here. That money isn't staying here. That money isn't coming into our communities. It's not being spent on people here.
Right.
The money is just leaving.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break and cut to an interview with Tanner and Zoe Hansen from Eco Garden Supply. But Clem, thank you so much for coming on the news today.
I appreciate you having me. It's been fun.
We'll be right back.
Attention Northern Lights listeners. Whether you're growing cannabis indoors or outdoors, organically or hydroponically, Eco Garden Supply has the tools to help you succeed. From premium organic nutrients to advanced hydro systems, they've got everything you need to cultivate like a pro at home. Head to ecogardensupply.com now or visit them in person at 800 Transfer Road, Suite 3, St. Paul, Minnesota 55114 and elevate your cannabis. Eco Garden Supply, growing supplies for the serious grower.